Not so long ago, we were part of something truly magical, and now we're opening a whole new chapter. Welcome back to the Once Upon a Fan podcast, hosted by David Van Norman and Amy Hood. This retrospective podcast blends fresh episode reviews with insider stories from our years at Once Upon a Fan, the internet's most popular destination for fans of ABC's Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Fan, I like it. It's so cheesy.
So whether you're a longtime oncer or you're just discovering the magic, we're excited to reopen the storybook with you once again. Hello?
Hello?
Who's this? Who's this? Is this Amy?
David?
Oh, God. Did we leave the microphones on?
7 years ago? Oh, my gosh. My battery is going to be so dead.
Well, that explains the monthly charge I've been seeing on my bank account. Anyways, Welcome back, everybody, to the Once Upon a Fan podcast. I was once Zach Van Norman. I am now David Van Norman, and I am joined by my OG co-host, Amy Hood.
Hello, darling. How have you been? I feel like it's been forever.
It has been forever, really. Life never slows down. Life always has some surprises and challenges for all of us, I think, which, of course, we will get into as part of this conversation on the podcast. So welcome back, everybody, to the Once Upon a Fan podcast. If you are one of our regular listeners who joined us back in the day, we are thrilled to have you joining us for this next chapter once again. If you are new and just discovering our podcast, welcome. We are happy to have you along with us as we reread the book Once Upon a Time that spans, 7 long years, about 22 chapters in each year, roughly. So it's quite the journey to take. I'm very excited to get back into this with everybody, especially you, Amy.
Yes, me too. 7 years, you're right. 7 seasons. And yesterday was actually the 7th once anniversary of the series finale. It ended 7 years ago yesterday. So it seems like an appropriate 777 since numbers are kind of a big Easter egg thing. So yeah, it's been a while, but I've definitely missed you, and I've missed so many of the people that were in our little chat rooms and our groups and our original people, and I'm excited to welcome in the new people that are just finding it.
Yeah, same. Also, as a quick note, interesting coincidence. Yesterday was also the 6th anniversary of the day that Game of Thrones had its series finale. So, Once Upon a Time in Days of Our Lives. So Once Upon a Time and Game of Thrones have the same series finale date, 1 year apart. I just thought that was really interesting.
Ooh.
So just a reminder for everybody who was with us before, but more for the people who are just finding our show for the first time. You may be wondering what Once Upon a Fan is or was and why you should be listening to us. So we're going to get into that just a little bit. So Once Upon a Fan back in the day was the most visited website that was dedicated to ABC's fairy tale drama Once Upon a Time. Between our Facebook and Twitter, we had almost 300,000, or we cleared 300,000 followers between those two pages. And then we had additional subscribers to our YouTube channels and so forth. However, Once Upon a Fan, as far as that website goes, has now shifted its URL to onceuponafandom.com. So yeah, if you want to read any of our old articles or see any of our interviews back in the day, you can certainly go to onceuponafandom.com and see them there. We also have a YouTube page for the podcast now, which has all of our interviews on it from back in the day, so you can find some of them there. And if you're listening to this on audio, you may be surprised to hear that there is now a video component to the Once Upon a Fan podcast. Yes, we are on video. We are going to attempt to make this a video series as well as an audio series. So bear with us as we dip our toes into this new world and see if it's something that we can sustain and see if it's something that we can maintain, because we have no idea what we're doing on that part.
So it's no different than the first time, basically.
Basically, yes. Forever not knowing what we're doing.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's one of the reasons why all of you new folks should be listening to us, is because we were the most visited website dedicated to Once Upon a Time. And not only that, but we had access to the showrunners and cast in a way that really not a lot of other fan sites did. And so we have the credentials to back it up that we are in fact the experts on Once Upon a Time. And that's why you should listen to us. Although I don't know if any of that made sense. Amy, what do you want to say?
I think you made sense. Yeah, it was. And when we talked to Gareth, who was the actual founder and editor of Once Upon a Fan, he'll get into more of the history. But yeah, from a very small little group of people on a Facebook page who were friends and just sort of chatting to this becoming a 300,000 plus follower, fan site, to getting press accreditation from ABC and through Disney Once Upon a Time, the actual show. It just got to be really, really huge. But one of the things that when we started the podcast that was kind of unique was that instead of having to wait to talk to other fans and people in the fandom community, we had a chat room and we had a separate page. So during the podcast, there was a lot of back and forth. We met a lot of other people that way. I think, we've made a lot of friends through all of that. And while this doesn't have a live chat room like the other one, we definitely still want to make sure to kind of be here to listen to what you guys want to say, which is a big part of why we are even coming back in the first place.
Definitely.
The Once Upon a Time fan site page on Facebook that all of you were following is no longer ours. It no longer belongs to Once Upon a Fan. And you might notice that the title changed. Now it says TV Times Once Upon a Fan or Once Upon a Time, something like that. But the TV time is in the front of it because that is not our site anymore. So like David said, we have new socials. There will be a YouTube. We have a new page and new web pages and new places to go to. So we'll be sure and keep those marked. Because I know the majority of people that we had were between Facebook and, good Lord, Twitter was insane. But Instagram, I think we're going to keep up on. And definitely, I actually just made a Facebook page post this morning. And so we'll have Instagram and TikTok, all the other socials this time around. Because hopefully, with these being socials, I think it's going to be important in a different way this time than it was for us the first time around. The first time around where we were very focused on, just making sure everybody had the latest news with the show, casting, things like that. And these great communities were built and we made a lot of friends. This time around, since a lot of us are here, a lot of you are here that have already watched through the show. If you were with us the first time, those of you who are just finding it on Hulu and Disney and stuff, we are super excited for you. But so since we're not going to be reviewing every episode this time and going through every single week, the social aspects are going to be important because of the fact that the communities are going to play a big part in this. And when I say that, it's because that's one of the main reasons that David wanted to jump in and that I even agreed to say yes to come back and do the podcast, is because of the huge aspect that has changed.
So again, just to reiterate, TV Times Once Upon a Time fans is not associated with us here at the Once Upon a Fan podcast or with onceuponafandom.com. The Twitter handle is also no longer associated with us. I'm not sure what that directs to now, but we don't have control of that Twitter handle anymore either. However, you can find us on OUAF at SDCC. That is our YouTube handle if you want to watch some of our YouTube stuff, some of my old interviews. It's OUAF, the @ symbol, SDCC. That is exclusively for all of the video interviews that we did over the years. And the reason why that is relevant is because those are the interviews that we're going to be talking about on TikTok maybe doing a little bit more on Instagram, and kind of discussing here on the podcast. That's one of the things, as Amy's mentioned, is that, one of the reasons we're coming back is that we want to kind of get the community back together for the show. We want to find all of our once friends again and just kind of touch base and see how everybody is doing. Because these days we know that the world needs a lot of hope and people are seeking community, and that includes the two of us. And since that's what Once Upon a Time gave the two of us through our time at Once Upon a Fan, we want to not only experience the show again, but remind ourselves and each other that you can go through terrible things. You can experience life's worst curses, which may or may not be unfolding right now, and you can still find a way to happiness, or at least still have hope in the possibility of a happy ending, because believing in the possibility of a happy ending is a very powerful thing. So that's one thing. But also, as I was just mentioning with all of our interviews on TikTok and so forth, we want to give you guys kind of a behind the scenes look at our experience with Once Upon a Fan. I'm sure that our lives looked amazing on the outside, and they really were in some aspects. If you look at my interviews, it's kind of crazy that those even happened. If you think about it, back in the day, I was an inexperienced fan going into a press room with experienced journalists who do this professionally, and I had never talked to a celebrity in that capacity before in my life. But despite the fact that everything looked so great and we were making all these connections and we had the podcast going on every week, we had serious, health and family issues going on in our personal lives. And, in some respects, that's also kind of what the show is about, accepting that life is not a fairy tale. And because of what was happening in our personal lives back then, we kind of know that firsthand. We knew it then, we know it now. And that's just one aspect of our experience that we will be talking about, because we'll also be talking about how the site grew over time to support a very vocal fandom. That's kind of where the community aspect comes into this, because again, we really want to interact with all of you fans of the show from back in the day. If you're on a rewatch with us, all of you new fans who are joining us for the first time, we definitely want to connect with you, see what this show is bringing to you, see what your experience is like watching it, this time around at this point in life, with everything going on in the world and everything that may be happening in your own world. And one of the things that's going to make this rewatch unique for all of us, I think, is that in a lot of ways, these episodes are going to be new for us again.
They are. One thing I'm sure a lot of people will be shocked to find out, especially since, we built so many friendships, and I don't just mean people on the cast and behind the scenes and things like that we're still friends with and talk to all the time. But neither one of us has gone back since the season finale and rewatched the show. We've seen an episode here or there, but we have not sat and rewatched the whole show through. And as much as I know we have comfort movies and comfort shows and things like that, and I've had a ton of people telling me this week already when they heard the whispers of the podcast about, comfort shows, I feel like people are going to be shocked to hear that. So I'm curious why you yourself, because I don't know why you haven't gone back. And because we kind of sort of went through a phase where we weren't talking very much. David and we only recently kind of, bridge that gap, and I'm very grateful for that. Because I love David so much, I always have. But I would love to know, since we haven't talked about it yet, why didn't you go back? Why haven't you gone back and rewatched it? Because I know, I was surprised to hear that you also had not gone back and rewatched the show yet.
I thought it was funny that neither one of us had, when that came up in conversation. And, one thing before we get into this, I just want to let everybody know that another aspect to this podcast is that we're going to be discussing some, real world issues that are very impactful. They might be triggering, but it's also just real life. It's what was happening with us. And since part of the message of the show is that life is not a fairy tale and you have to find a way to get through, and magic can't solve everything. I just want to be real about what was happening in life and, why the show was so important, because the the reason why the show had such a positive impact is because there were so many other real world things that were happening that were causing so much chaos in my life. But really, I think the main reason I haven't gone back to watch the show is just because it's really kind of bittersweet. It's kind of like trying to capture magic in a bottle again, I suppose. That period of time was just so amazing and brought so many positive changes to my life. But on the reverse side of that, you know, the last year of the show, one of my very best friends passed away in a car accident. I myself was in a car accident. The show ended, the website ended, the podcast ended, my relationship ended. Just a lot of things came to an end that year. And it's kind of been a little bit chaotic ever since. And I don't know why I didn't think that Once could provide some kind of comfort during all of this, but it was just kind of sad. I didn't want to go back and rewatch the show because it not only reminded me of all the good times, but it kind of reminded me of everything that was going on in my personal life at the time too. And those were some really chaotic years. So, you know, it was just kind of a mixed bag, and I didn't really want to open that box again. I just said it's a mixed bag, and then I didn't want to open a box. I'm such a good writer. I'm the metaphor king. But yeah, that was kind of the reason. Yeah, there's a lot of feelings in Once Upon a Time. It changed my life forever. So it's a really complicated relationship, I think. But I was surprised to hear that you hadn't watched it either. I was sure that you would have watched some of it, if not all of it, at least some of it. So why didn't you go back and watch the show?
Wow. That whole section of our lives, like you said, sometimes it seems kind of surreal. And even though you can make things look beautiful and perfect on social media, behind the scenes, there are real life things going on. And in sort of a separate way, I feel very much like the experience of the show itself and Once Upon a Fan. Almost when the series finale came around, it kind of bookended something, and rewatching it was going to be very different because, you know, the experience of watching it with all of these people and having all of these people, you know, we were actively able to help, and you know, that were like, hey, I met my best friend because we were chatting on this place, and I was okay to go. I went and got counseling because of that, you know, seeing this or talking about this. And, you know, that for me was a big part of why it meant something to me. But differently than you, it wasn't the last year of Once Upon a Time. It was actually predating Once Upon a Time's start. There were some major things that had happened in my life that were very, very difficult and ongoing. And sort of Once Upon a Time started a few years after I had kind of cut out all of I left where I worked for, I think I had worked there for years. I left. Some people there I was so close to. I pretty much cut a majority of people out of my life, and it was not to any fault of their own. There were some things going on. It was really difficult and ongoing. And then the Once Upon a Time experience kind of started, and Once Upon a Fan sort of snowballed into this massive thing. And and Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, because everybody knows how much I love
Yeah,
Once
good
Upon a
thing.
Time in Wonderland.
Nice shout out.
I'm still a bitter girl about not getting more than my one season. But anyway, yeah. So we got into Once Upon a Fan and Once Upon a Time the show, and it was that escape. And I don't know, for those 7 years, it was like my 1 hour a week, and then working with all of you on, you know, the site and the chatting. And then it bookended, and that kind of went away. And it was, you know, so while you're in the real world the whole time,
Hmm.
but you have this outlet, this sort of escape, this community of people, and they're seeing one side of it for sure, you know. But
Yeah.
and I've continued to keep in touch with our friends who worked on the show and things, and I'm always cheerleading their projects. I love them, and the not rewatching has absolutely nothing to do. It's not because I didn't love the show, because obviously I would not be
Right.
here
Exactly.
if I didn't.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's important that, and this is why I agreed to come back and podcast again, even though we're having a video component, which I was super nervous about, but I'm okay with it now. I'm okay. Um, the reality is that and I don't just mean nationally or locally, worldwide, I think people in general are in a place right now, many people, I'll say that, where, like you said, everybody needs hope, or even a glimmer of hope that maybe there's the possibility of a happy ending, or, you know, a resolution or an outcome. And I feel like people would see all of these things in the show.
So yeah, like we said, we're going to be discussing some real world issues, and we're going to be relating these real world issues to the stories that are been told in the show. And it's going to be very real. It's going to be very personal. It's going to be very deep. Like we said, it's going to be, you know, a little bit of a trigger warning. So now that we've talked about everything that this podcast is going to be about, and we've let everybody know some of the heavier stuff that's going to be involved. Obviously, this is not a completely Debbie Downer show. This isn't SNL. We do have a lot of positive aspects that we're going to be talking about as well. So that's what we're going to focus on now. We're going to be switching gears to something with a little bit more energy. So, Amy, first question for you. As we dive into how we fell in love with Once Upon a Time, how we got involved with the fan site, and why stories like the show matter for our mental well-being, how did you first discover Once Upon a Time?
I had heard about it through First Look, which is when you go to, not all movie theaters have it, but when you go to some movie theaters, before they even get to previews, they have First Look, and it's usually TV shows that are coming. And I had not heard a peep about it. I was already lifelong Disney fan and everything, but we sat down. I had my kids with me, and another adult, and the promo for Once Upon a Time came on, and the only actual footage they had was just that one blip of snow on the floor and the curse coming through the castle windows, and Regina standing over her when Snow asks where they're going, and Regina's very slyly looking at her, and it's so excited she can barely contain it, and says somewhere horrible, and then everything starts breaking. And but that was the only piece of footage that was in it. So everything else was they were just talking to Adam and Eddie, this is what it's going to be about. But just seeing that little bit, I turned to the adult with me, not my children. I turned to the adult and I said, I knew immediately. I was like, oh my God, that's going to be my show right there. And of course, the entire theater was dead silent because, oops, that was the last promo on the preview look. So as I'm saying, that's going to be my show, it went from being very loud to very quiet as that came flying out of my mouth, as it would. So my apologies, the rest of the theater, back in whenever that was out, 2010, 2011.
2011.
That's how that's when I first heard about it. And they hadn't even put out commercials, or they hadn't started the Entertainment Weekly print ads yet either. So that was the very first look I had gotten at it, and I had not heard anything prior. But I know yours was a little bit different. You had mentioned to me before, I think you actually did see a full promo the first time you heard about it.
Yeah, so when I first heard about the show, I mean, I should also say that I too have been a lifelong Disney fan my whole life. My blood cells have mouse hairs on them, so that tells you anything about who I am as a person and how much I love Disney. I saw this preview. It was like 2 minutes. It may have even been 2.5 minutes, and it was basically footage only from the pilot. Like they hadn't really released anything from any of their episodes yet, and I remember watching it and just thinking to myself, well, first of all, I was surprised because at this point in 2011, they hadn't done a lot of live action adaptations of any of the animated films. So the only one they'd really completed was 1996's 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil. So seeing like live action fairy tale characters, live action Disney, and having it be clear that, all these characters are going to be living in the same place, that was new. Like that was a novelty. And it was very exciting because also things like the famous princess scene in Wreck-It Ralph 2, like, Ralph breaks the internet. That also hadn't happened yet. There was no pairing of princesses with each other. So having them all in the same place in a show, live action, getting, to see amazing costumes and the dragons and the castles and the magic that we all love about the Disney movies, in live action, like that was crazy, and it was very exciting. And so I was very into it from basically jump, and I was looking forward to it quite a bit. And then, like you just mentioned a moment ago, when they did the print ads where they had 5 posters of Snow, Charming, Emma, Rumple, and Regina, and each one of them kind of had their own color and their own theme. For those of you who are watching this along on YouTube, it's right there. It's the blue one. So when I saw those posters, I was like, oh, like they're really going for it, because Rumpelstiltskin was featured as one of those posters, and Disney had never made a Rumpelstiltskin movie, and they still haven't. So that was kind of also one of the first clues that they were incorporating more than just Disney characters, even that they were going to be taking other literary characters and including them even from properties that they had not explored yet themselves. And so it was all just very, very exciting.
I was happy about that too, now that you've said that. I'm a big literature nerd, but I'm also, in addition to that, not just fairy tales. I mean, I love Edgar Allan Poe, but Wizard of Oz, immediately I was hoping for, that was my grandmother's favorite movie, her favorite book. That was like our thing her whole life. So, I mean, I was immediately starting thinking, okay, well, if they're bringing in Rumpelstiltskin and things they haven't done before, maybe I'll get this or this or this or this or this. And, as they got on, we did end up bringing in so many different literary characters that were wildly out of the Disney fairy tale scope. So and mythology too, another thing that I was always pretty passionate about. So it ended up, remember thinking it was going to be like a blending of so many things that I really liked a lot. So yeah, that whole literature, mythology, Disney and fairy tales, whether they were Disney-fied or the old scary, really dark originals. I loved all that blending stuff. All that stuff was part of my weird things that I've always been into. So
yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz. It's almost as though they were hinting at those stories at some point in the pilot. Maybe we'll come back to that a little bit later. Maybe. So when the show first premiered, they ran the first 7 episodes like weekly. Like there wasn't any break. They didn't repeat anything. For episodes 1 through 7, those aired in kind of a chunk. And then there was a month break, and they brought it back starting on episode 8. So for those first 7 episodes, which includes the pilot, The Thing You Love Most, Snowfalls, The Price of Gold, That Still Small Voice, The Shepherd, and The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, what did you think of those first 7 episodes as, the story was kind of kicking off?
I think for me personally, I became more and more invested as each one of those came along, because we started to get these Storybrooke versions that we weren't sure who they were yet, as opposed to the few we were told right off the bat. So, I love to Scooby-Doo investigate the hell out of a mystery. So that's where, I think the theorizing started, which ended up being a huge thing. All the Easter eggs, the numbers, that Easter eggs are my big thing too. But I love them. And I remember thinking, while you were mentioning the titles just now, it reminded me, I was never a huge Pinocchio fan as far as Disney, and the story. And
Sure.
I did not expect to really love that still small voice, because I remember seeing the ones before it and thinking, oh well, I probably won't like this week's as much because it's gonna focus, on Pinocchio. Obviously, I was gonna watch. That is absolutely ended up being one of the best episodes. I was like floored by how much I liked that episode, and I don't mean just in a superficial the way it came across. I mean, like, there were some small little things just here and there that kind of emotionally whack, 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 whack,
Mm,
just,
mm,
slapped you right in the face. So,
I
yeah,
do.
I loved them. I thought they got better, and the kind of mystery, and the more that it went on, the more questions it brought up. So I felt they did a really good job of kind of getting people to want to go to the next week so they could figure out what the hell was happening. What just
Yeah.
happened? What was
Yeah.
this? And the characters, I thought, we were learning a little bit more about them each time, and they weren't what you're, normally expect out of them. So I know you had an attachment immediately to one character in particular. So who was that?
Yeah, I really loved guard number 2. I just
Yeah,
thought
yeah,
his
yeah, Hottie.
performance was amazing. When
He rocked
Charming
those
took,
feathers.
I'm
Mm.
telling you, and when Charming took him down in the castle, that stunt work was just sublime. No, really, as I look back at that list of those first 7 episodes, I'm kind of reminded, and with what you just said, actually, I'm reminded of the fact that every week when we were meeting characters in Storybrooke, we didn't know who they were in the fairy tales yet. And some of them would be revealed within that episode that we were being introduced to them in. And for some of them, it was a mystery. It was a season-long mystery, or in some cases, like with Dr. Whale, the mystery stretched into the second season.
Yes.
And so I kind of forgot that part of the fun of the show in those early episodes was trying to guess who everybody was and who they were going to be, and not necessarily what was going to happen, but like, how do these things relate to what else is going on? It was just such a really interesting premise. And I can tell you that I really enjoyed the pilot. I wasn't sure about the show after the second episode. Actually, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I like what they're doing with this. And then Snowfalls, which is the story of Snow and Charming and how they met, and I really took to Josh Dallas and Jennifer Goodwin's performances as those characters in that episode. Their chemistry was off the charts. Clearly, they ended up married with 2 children, and I just loved it. I loved it so much, in fact, that I wrote an article about the symbolism of the color red, and I used Charming's outfit in Snowfalls as the basis for that article, but we'll get into that later. I loved The Price of Gold. Emma has a speech to a cursed Cinderella that literally changed my whole life. And, that still small voice. I've never been a big Pinocchio person either, partly because I saw that movie when I was a small child, and Monster the Whale was traumatizing to the point that even now I am still afraid of that damn thing. So I did like that still small voice. The first, like the opening though, it actually scared the shit out of me. Like, that whale is terrifying. Being on a ship in a storm and seeing a creature out in seas, like, that is terrifying. So I did not enjoy that part of it, but I really liked the rest of it. So obviously, beyond the fact that we're both Disney fans and we both loved having, a live action story to enjoy with all these fantastic episodes that we saw every week, what was it about the show for you that resonated so much? Because I know that for so many people, the show brought, a sense of community, maybe a sense of belonging, helped them feel like they weren't necessarily alone. But for other people, it has a different meaning. So I'm just curious about what it was that resonated with you so much.
For me, I definitely liked and was kind of drawn to the core message that even the possibility believing in even the possibility of a happy ending is a very powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the show came along at a time where I had it was a few years prior, but I had pretty much cut ties due to no fault of their own. But most of my social circles and everything were at work. I had retired from a place I worked for a very long time, and I had pretty much cut them off. A lot of things behind that. But anyway, when I was watching this and it came out, it was sort of at a time where I was like, I really don't know or see a happy ending. I was in a really difficult part of my life, even though social media wise, I'm sure for you too, it's very, very easy to make it look so shiny and happy. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it was kind of an escape at first, and then as the community kind of built, even before we started becoming friends with staff and some of the actors and the behind the scenes folks, and then getting into like the press part of it, as just someone watching the show, these communities were coming together and finding each other and stuff. And I will always end up being like the mom, and so I kind of was like adopting, come my little ducklings, come, I had a new little gaggle of people who needed some, I don't know, some reassurance, some love,
myself
hope.
included.
My little duck. Yeah, just a group that needed something. And I was also glad to see that a lot of people found things in the show and in the outside online communities that they were looking for. So, I mean, for me, that was a big important part of it too, aside from, just getting to experience that. And then what the site and the show kind of snowballed into rapidly.
Unbelievable.
It was like blink of an eye. Like I didn't even realize it was happening, and then you're in the middle of it, So
yeah,
you understand. So
I do.
When you started, I know you've been through. You and I have been friends since then. So you'd been through some stuff. So what was it? You said you weren't sure about after the second episode, but then you liked the rest of them. But what was it that kind of hooked you and kept you snagged in there, and then got you stolen from the real world and brought into the Once Upon a Fan staff with the rest of us crazies?
So happy to join all of you in our magical psych ward. So for me to answer that question, I'm going to have to delve into the details of the episode The Price of Gold, because it's Emma's speech to Ashley in that episode, the one that I mentioned earlier. That's what hooked me into this show for life. To give all of our listeners a little bit of a context, when this show had come out, my mother had passed away 3 years prior, and my younger brother was living with me at the time. And as you would expect for somebody who has lost a parent when they were only 22, I was experiencing all of the emotions that you would expect, right? Like the despair, the depression, the anxiety, but also hopelessness, feeling like there was no light at the tunnel. My world felt very gray, and it felt like there was legitimately no possibility of life ever being better or okay or, happy again. All of my emotions were very, very muted. I really didn't respond very much because I was just fully in the depths of grief and all of the things that come with it. And then I liked the pilot. I wasn't sure after the second episode, but then I've actually realized that if you watch the first 2 episodes back to back, they are actually an expanded pilot. They work very well together. And I know a lot, television shows and stories are kind of structured to be that way. They're set up and payoff. But those 2 episodes feel like a very unique thing. Like they feel like it's like a movie, right? If you put it together, it's about 90 minutes. And it really does feel like a pilot because I feel like it fleshes out more of the world, more of the characters, more of the rules and the foundation. And you're not only seeing the perspective from like the hero's point of view that we got in the pilot, but you're getting Regina's perspective. You're getting the villain's perspective. So it's giving us a broader understanding of the stakes of the story, why the villain is doing what they're doing, and kind of like just like what's happening, right? They've dumped us in the middle of the story. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but those first two kind of give you one. And then the Snow White, Snow Falls happens, and it's so good. Snow White and Prince Charming. Oh, okay, yes, I'm here for the love story. I like having a little bit of romance in my storytelling, So I was here for that. But then the Price of Gold happened, and there's a scene where they're in Storybrooke, and Emma is talking to Ashley, who she's the cursed Cinderella, and she's pregnant. And, Ashley is just lamenting the fact that she doesn't really have any support for this baby, and people are telling her that she should give it up, and probably that she's not going to be a good mother, and all of these things. And Emma asks her how old she is, and she says she was 19, I think, and Emma says I was 18. So after that, Emma offers encouragement to Cinderella, to Ashley, and she says people are going to tell you who you are your whole life. You just got to punch back and say, no, this is who I am. You want people to look at you differently? Make them. You want to change things? You're going to have to go out there and change them yourself, because there are no fairy godmothers in this world. I don't know why that line specifically hit me so hard, but it was like a ton of bricks, because suddenly I just felt like I was like, she's right. This is never going to change. Mom is always going to be gone. She is not coming back. You are going to have to figure out a way to live with this. Like this, you cannot drop anchor here in this emotional place, in this intellectual place. You can't stay here. You have to move on. You have to find a way. And it wasn't an instant change, right? It wasn't like some major epiphany and all of a sudden I had this thought to myself and I'm like, oh, my life is perfect. What trauma? Like, that is not how it happened. Even now, I am still dealing with the trauma of my mom's passing, right? Like, it's a very heavy issue to deal with. And that was 17 years ago. So that it's been a long time. But it was the light in the tunnel. Suddenly, out of all of this darkness, there was a light in the distance. And it was that quote that, God bless David H. Goodman for writing that line, because I'll never. I can't tell you what that did for my psyche. It can't tell you what that did for my spirit. Because even though I was still in the depths of grief and depression, despair, anxiety, all of those things, and still was working very hard to get out of them. It was like that scene from the Never-Ending Story when Atreyu and Artax were stuck in the doldrums or whatever, and the horse just dies. Like that's what it felt like. Like moving through the emotions at that time was like moving through a quicksand, through mud, through like, that's what it felt like. And it was totally dark. And so hearing Emma say, you have to change it yourself. It was not only like a light hit in the distance. It was like suddenly there was a hand reaching out to pull me out of the sludge that I was stuck in. I have never forgotten that line. I've never forgotten how much it meant to me. I don't understand. I don't understand how one line of dialogue could have started a shift in my perspective so extreme that it literally changed everything in my life on every single level, professionally, personally, everything. One line of dialogue, like David H. Goodman, if you ever hear this, all of these good things that have happened to me are your fault. And I thank you very, very hard. You're such a jerk. How dare you write such a brilliant line?
David's not exaggerating. It really did change the entire trajectory of his life, because, I mean, you're not even in the same state. You literally picked up and moved, changed course on what you wanted to do. So between that spark of that conversation Emma has, and then going forward, and then the Once Upon a Fan carrying out through the pressing, just, brought you to a whole completely different spot. Almost a different person, I would almost say,
I would agree with that. I was, I've talked a lot, so I promise that I will stop talking soon and we can switch topics. But just to wrap this up, I was so lost back then, and I know that whether you've experienced grief through the loss of a person, or you're experiencing grief through like the loss of a job, the loss of like some kind of maybe financial security in your life, maybe your car has broken down. If something like unexpected like that has just like totally upended your life in a way that has reverberating consequences, like that stretch through time, right? Like sometimes things happen and it's just a one-off and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't slammed my thumb in the refrigerator door. That was really stupid. I'll have to watch that next time. You're dealing with the pain of that for maybe a few hours while it hurts, and then it pretty much dissipates and goes away. There are other things in life that happen that affect you for years. And when you have a show like this that brings such a level of comfort, I just, it that encapsulates why I wanted to do this podcast, is because storytelling has the power to affect such positive change in people's lives. And I'm living proof of that. And so I just want to tell anybody who's listening to this that if you're going through something right now and you're struggling and any of the things that I just mentioned are happening to you, that doesn't mean it's the end of the story. Like it's still going to keep going. You can find a way to happiness through everything that's going on, even if finding a way to happiness means that you're just recognizing something positive in your life, like on a daily basis, being grateful for the fact that you have a roof over your head, or the ability to, food, if you have cleaning supplies, the ability to clean your home. Like there are a lot of things to be grateful for, and they seem like small things, but if you can find a little level of gratitude for those things, suddenly like that gratitude multiplies and you realize how fortunate you really are, and it does lift you up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And I think in the communities that were built too, where people were finding friends and found family, I think, like you mentioned, with a loss or something happens to you, when you have a person or a place, or, usually it's someone, and then that person or situation, for one reason or another, whether it is through death or distance or just, timing being off or whatever, you lose that. It can, it leave you in a void for a very long time. And it's difficult to find a way or even see that there is a way out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people found I always call them their person. A lot of people found their person when they started talking to each other in these communities, because they found like people, in people were kind to each other, which I feel like, I know sometimes the squeaky wheel, gets the most attention. So sometimes there was some vocal, loud, uh, discord here or there. But for the most part, it felt like people were honestly finding a place and finding people and not feeling so alone for themselves. And that was one of the reasons I agreed to come back and do the podcast, was because seeing all of those things happen for so many people, was really one of the best things I think that came out of the show, was how many communities and friends and people that, I mean, we're talking, it's 7 years since it's been over, and it started 7 years before that. So for 14 years now, people are still friends, still, the majority of people I'm friends with now, and I don't just mean, actors or directors, writers that worked on the show, because I mean, I love them too, consider them friends, absolutely. But I mean, I'm talking about also people just that came around wanting to talk, or, these people are, now you're looking at 14-year friendships. So, and communities, people that were passively or actively, honestly, suicidal at the time, have said, sent messages and letters that they came through, they found whether it was hope or what they were looking for. So I think that was important. And that's why, personally, that's why I came back to revisit it, because I know we've had, with this anniversary, we've had some people speak out about it lately. So it's definitely, I feel like it's about time to come around for a rewatch.
Yeah.
The world's in a place now. It's in a place, and yeah,
The world is in a place, yes, and it
it's in a
definitely needs some
place.
hope right now.
Yeah.
And so again, we're just trying to bring some of the hope that we found in Once Upon a Time. We're just kind of trying to bring it back, I guess. We want to bring it back to everybody who was with us the first time around. We want to bring it to all of you who are discovering the show for the first time, because there was such an amazing community. The Oncer fandom was loving and creative and passionate and vocal and little notes, and at times could be so generous and comforting, and other times not so much. Like you said, the squeaky wheel, gets the attention, and sometimes people use that to their advantage. And to your point, 14 years. I mean, Amy and I have now known each other for 14 years. That's almost half my life. We have a
Yeah.
mutual friend named Jackie who also used to work with us on Once Upon a Fan, and who may end up joining us on the podcast one day for an episode. And I am still friends with her. We are still friends with her. And through my friendships with these people, I have made other friends, to the point that my entire circle of really close friends, the people who I can call in an emergency, or if I'm just, for whatever reason, if I'm feeling down and need somebody to talk to, if I want to go to see a movie with somebody, if I just need to vent about a situation, I know all of those people through fandom. I know all of these people through Once Upon a Time, really, because if I hadn't met Jackie because of Once Upon a Time, I wouldn't have started watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is why I started knowing all of these people. So this show has had such a huge effect on so many people's lives. It's created so much love and like I said, creativity, because man, like some of the fan art from back in the day, that people were making, some of which I own, it was just incredible. I mean, even a professional artist like Jason Palmer, who has amazing pieces, not only of Once Upon a Time, but of pretty much any show or movie you could think of. He's got a huge catalog. It brought just so much beauty, to the world. And I just love this show so much. It had such a positive impact in so many different ways. I feel like it set a lot of people free to kind of find themselves, gave them permission to, practice the magic they felt in their own heart. So yeah, I love this show so hard. I'm so glad that we're back doing this. And now I'm going to throw it to Amy, who is going to close this very quick intro episode for us.
So basically, this episode is just sort of an introduction. We kind of wanted to reach back out. So if you were with us before, or if you're new, we could just give you an idea of why we're jumping back in, what the type of things we'll be looking at and talking about. And as David mentioned, it will be a little deeper because we have some retrospective um, time to look back now, 7 years to kind of reflect on some things. So this was a shorter episode. It's just gonna just introduce you a little bit to what we'll be getting into. But in the future, we'll be going into some of the episodes, the themes, what was happening with people at the time, what they were telling us they were getting out of it, and relating, so many of the real world things that were happening for them and that are happening, now, and how hopefully we can continue to help people pull a little bit of hope from it. Because again, the whole reason we wanted to bring this back at this time is because the entire world right now, not just our country, but I think everybody could use a little bit of hope right now. Things are very heavy and they're hard, whether it's worldwide things, nationwide things going on, or personal things. People are going through a lot, and a lot of that is very, very difficult to find the way through. So hopefully, if you have a little way to bring a tiny bit of hope to the world, then we believe you should do it. And we think maybe this is our way to kind of bring a tiny little piece of that back.
And sometimes when you lose your way, we are also going to be here to remind you of what the goal is and bring you back on track. If you are lost in your search for hope ever, we are here for you, friends. We're going to be right along on that journey with you, because we are also experiencing the world as it is today and how it is rapidly changing in so many ways. We also are affected personally by a lot of the circumstances that are going on in our planet right now. So we want everyone to know you're not alone. We are here. We're here for you. We're here for each other. We are not new to this. We are not new to the search for hope in the face of seemingly, invincible odds. So that is what the show is going to be about. We're going to wrap it here for now. In the future, as Amy said, you can look forward to us sharing some behind the scenes stories about our time on Once Upon a Fan. I will also be getting into what was going through my head when I interviewed the cast at San Diego Comic-Con 2013, including my now infamous interview with Jennifer Morrison, in which I had a completely emotional fanboy moment with her. And I was so embarrassed at the time, but it has apparently had a really positive impact. So that's all I wanted it to do. If you're interested in seeing those interviews as they are now, you can check out the YouTube page OUAF SDCC. Again, that is OUAF SDCC on YouTube. And then once we're done talking about Once Upon a Time, we will be expanding into other fandoms, talking about other television shows, the ways that those stories and characters have also brought hope to our lives. Things like Star Trek or Grace and Frankie. No, I'm just kidding. Things like Star Trek or The Dragon Prince or Schitt's Creek. We have a lot of different universes and worlds that we can explore as we jump through different portals here on the Once Upon a Fan podcast. So that's what we're going to be doing. So we'll see you next time. We appreciate you listening. If anybody is listening, who knows? Hello, is anybody? Hello, is there anybody out there? But that's not all. Amy and I are also going to be watching episodes of Once Upon a Time live together here on a stream, and we're going to be putting those videos on YouTube. So if you, like me, are a reaction video junkie and you're interested in seeing what we think of episodes here at Once Upon a Fan, because we're going to be watching them for the first time. Amy and I have not watched Once Upon a Time since it went off the air. Neither one of us. So if you want to see our somewhat muted, maybe edited, I should say, reactions to some of these episodes, then you can check out our other YouTube channel, which is OUAF Podcast. Again, that is at OUAF as in fan podcast. And we will have some of those videos up online shortly. We do not have anything up there yet because we haven't watched the episodes yet, but you can look forward to those coming soon. And that is going to do it for us here at the Once Upon a Fan podcast. Thank you all so much again for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.